lie awake at night trying to comprehend it. I've got a hunch. Elation, bloom, film compression, grain, breath. What is that damn password? There's just something intangible about the film look. It's an echo of the past. It harks back to the birth of modern media itself. Dehancer. Could this be the answer? I used one small eye footage light to shoot the whole thing. So if you want to see behind the scenes of how I shot all this, then check out the link up here. So for that intro, I utilised a plugin called Dehancer. It's available for all the major NLEs, non-linear editors, such as Final Cut, Davinci Resolve, and of course Premiere Pro. Because I'm going to be utilising some Prores Raw footage for this example, I'm going to use Final Cut Pro. So let's get into Final Cut Pro now, and I'm going to show you exactly how to use it. Okay, here we are in Final Cut Pro, and I've got a few clips already on the timeline here. So I've taken the liberty to de-squeeze these first four because they were shot with anamorphic lenses, and what I mean by that is that if we go into this mode, you can see that I've reduced the Y scale to 79.5%. So this clip is from my short film called Loose Ends, which is based around 1920 or so, hence the costume. So our lovely protagonist here, played by Ray Bennett, he's sat on a log right next to a fire, and you've got the river behind him, and it's fully outdoors. So we didn't use any artificial light, it's all natural lighting. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over to the info page here, and because this is ProRes RAW, we can actually change some of the metadata values here. So we can change the ISO to whatever we want to, and it will be as if we shot it in that ISO. And we might come back to these settings later. So let's get straight in to adding Dehancer. So to add Dehancer to the clip, you can double click on it or drag it and drop it. So it's on there now, and it starts off with the last settings that I used. And as you can see, that's made it look kind of strange. In Dehancer software, they actually have, rather than just go with the Rec 79 or Rec 20 or whatever you want to go for, you can actually pick your camera, provided it's covered. They are updating these all the time. In fact, just today I saw an update for a load of Canon cameras. So they just added the Canon, R6, R6 Mark II, R7, R8, R5C. So there's a lot more Canon cameras now, which is great. But I shot this on a Panasonic GH5S in Vlog-L. And as you can see, boom, we've already got a somewhat workable image. Now, I'm going to turn everything off so that we can go one step at a time from the very first. So we've input the correct camera and we've got a corrected image here. Now, to my eye, it is a little bit warm. So rather than using I could use the temperature compensator here, and that would work. That works fine, as you can see. little bit purpley, so if we add a bit of green to it, you can get quite a workable image there. However, I shot in RAW, so I should make full use of that and adjust the temperature gauge here to find something to my liking. So down to about there, and I actually prefer that. Now we can also mess with exposure if we think it's a bit overexposed, but you know, I'm pretty happy with 800. I think that's great for this image. There might be some slight overexposed speckles in the highlights here, but that is the sea and the sun was bouncing right off of it, so that's to be expected. Really what we want exposed correctly is the character here. So a lot of the settings you'll be able to come back and adjust things as you go, but if we go from top to bottom, the film developer gives you some contrast, gamma corrections and color separation, color boost. And one of the biggest selling points of this software for me is the film profiles that it has. Now, they have analyzed all of these film stocks multiple times to replicate exactly what they would look like. And you don't just get one LUT, or whatever you want to call it. It's not just one simple thing. You actually, when you click one on, you can push-pull the EV based on 3 different profiles they've come up with, and you can go between all of them. So let me show you what that looks like. So there we go. We've put one, just the first one on there, and we can either go that there, or that look there, or that look there, which are all 3 real profiles that they've created from the real film stock, but you get full adjustment between them all, like so. But I don't think this is the right stock for us. So let's go for... Now this is the Prokudin Gorski 1906, but I think that's quite a good look, especially on that all the way down here. That's quite good. So I'm going to go for that, so you can see what it's like without and with. It does pull up the exposure a little bit, so we'll have to work with that. Now, film compression is what's really going to sell it as film. That's another aspect to it, because if we get the lumiscopes up, you can see that the water there is almost hitting the limit for exposure in that area. And so when we put the film compression on, you can see that pulls that down, because on film stock you wouldn't have, it would be softer, more like so. In fact, I might even pull it down even more. So if I move the white point along here, you can see that that's bringing that down even more. So a lot of these, it's interesting to play with them and see what happens. And that is actually, it's brought the water back to a more pleasant exposure, which is, you know, how super useful is that? So let's have a look at expand. So on this one, you can move where the black point is. And I think we'll probably come back to this later. So we could go back up here and overexpose the water again. But let's reset this parameter, because I think we'll come back to this. Because first of all, I want to do the print. We've got the really popular Kodak 2383 film print, and let's have a look how that looks. So there's already quite a lot of contrast in this image because we've got the brightness behind, because he's backlit at the moment. So I don't want to add too much contrast in. If anything, I'd probably reduce. So we can see before and after of that. It's kind of pulled things over a little bit. Now color head, you can bring things out, because I think there's been a bit of green introduced by the print film. So if I pull that over a little bit to bring some purple in, that makes it a bit more natural. And obviously you can put tone into the shadows, or target the mid-tones and target the highlights. So that's it before and after. Not much of a difference there. Now we're really getting somewhere. So with film grain, generally when you apply film grain from other apps and things, or if you've just got overlays, it's just a blanket, here's some film grain, put it on top. But actually the software here is using some intelligent algorithms to apply grain more in some areas and less than others, to make it appear how it would appear if you were actually shooting on these film stocks. So film stocks, obviously, with your digital camera, you can change the ISO manually, but with film, the ISO is set on the actual film. So you could have an ISO 50 film stock, which you would use in brighter environments, and then you'd have a film stock that's 500 ISO for darker environments. So that is an easy way to choose your film grain. Basically, the higher the ISO on these stocks, the more grain there's going to be. So if you quite like it, then go for the higher one. Also, they've got 8mm film, 16mm, 35 and 65mm in all these 3 different ISO levels too. And the bigger the millimeters, the less visible the grain's going to be. So for this, I want it to look kind of dated, so I might try 16 at 500. There we go, that's very, very grainy. And if you want to do custom, anytime you choose something in one of these sections, when you then go to custom, it starts you off from the last thing you chose. So you see where that was there when I chose 65. If I then choose the 8mm and then go back to custom, it's now taking me from that last chosen profile to make my customizations. So if you start with looking at which one you like, so I chose the 16-500, and then I can go to custom from there, and then I can see what I'm working with. So if I think the film grain is a bit big, then I can reduce the size of them, which makes them less noticeable. But I'm going to keep that quite high, actually. The amount is obviously how much there is. Film resolution. Now, if you keep it as 100, then the film quality is not going to be degraded at all. It's not going to be softened. But the more you drag this to the left, the softer the image becomes. And I'm gonna just adjust that slightly down to about 88, so that we're getting a little bit of a softer image, but not too much. And then you can choose how much this applies in the different areas. So if you want it stronger in the highlights or less strong, you can do that there. So we can just target the shadows or the mid-tones or the highlights, and then the chroma too. So the different kinds of film. Negatives obviously is when you have a negative print that you then burn to a positive. That would be more grain, as you can see, because it's like going through the process twice. So I choose positive because I'm imagining this was the method that produces less grain, which is the positive. And then you can choose a digital version or the analog. So we can see the before and after. And you can see that it reduces the contrast a little bit and overall softens the image. And, you know, it's very pleasing grain, I must say. Halation. I wonder how much this is going to be of an impact. So the halation will occur on the brighter areas, especially when things are backlit or if they're an actual light source themselves. And we can see it better if we choose one without a remjet, so no remjet. And then you can see the red starts to appear in those aforementioned areas. And this is actually something that happens on real film stock. And you can replicate this, what some people would call a fault, in your footage. Now, me personally, I like to use this quite sparingly. So if I was ever going to use it, I might tend to start from a 65-70 and then at a push, maybe lower it if the image required. Now we can actually click mask mode here and then we can see where it's being applied. So you can barely tell on there, there's a little bit here, but then if we take the remjet off, you can see it applies in more areas. And of course, you can go to customize that again and make all the changes to all the different elements. So let's have a look at how that one was. So let's have a look at the subtle version. Great, that's what I'm going to go with. And bloom comes hand in hand with halation. They're both caused by a similar thing. And so if you really want to make it authentic and sell the look, then you probably want to use bloom and halation. But I definitely like bloom, and halation, it's give and take. So bloom adds that glowiness around the brighter areas. So because the subject is backlit, we can see on his back and shoulders and head, there's some bloom glow there. So let's take off mask mode and just have a look. You can see what it does to the water and the subject. It adds a sort of glowiness around the highlighted areas. And you can imagine that this is quite an impressive feat, that this software can do this and it just grabs it straight away. Really cool. Now, film damage is a bit of fun. And obviously when you've got real film stock and it's been printed and it's at the cinema or been played on a projector, it picks up little scratches just through use. And these scratches and blemishes or bits of dust actually show up on the image. So you can replicate this, and obviously, again, the lower the millimeters, the more visible some of these things are going to tend to be, because it's enlarged more. So an 8mm still gets shown on the same size screen as a 65mm, but to fit that screen, you can imagine everything's been stretched out further. So every little bit of dust appears much bigger on an 8mm. So if you just want a softer, more subtle look, definitely go for 65/70. And then maybe you can even customize it. If you don't want hairs, then you can just turn hairs off, or you can increase the amount of hairs, the scale of the hairs, the scratches, you can turn on and off, etc., etc. So the film breath is going to essentially slightly raise and lower the exposure, because it's just like how things are some frames will appear brighter than others as you go along. So I'm definitely going to go for a less strong effect with the film breath. And the gate weave is how much the film is moving closer and further from the bulb. Because it's film that's just getting shot through at really high speed in front of a bulb, which then shines the light through it and projects that onto the screen which people are viewing it on. And obviously the film isn't always staying perfectly flat. It can go further and slightly towards, which actually has the effect of almost enlarging and then decreasing the size ever so slightly of the image. And it might also make things wobble around slightly. So let's have that as well on the 65/70, just so it's less of an effect. Now, vignette is definitely a favourite of mine. I quite like the way an image looks when it's vignetted, especially if you frame subjects in the centre. So this is a perfect example of that. Now, to make sure I'm getting exactly how I want it, I tend to remove feather all the way down, drag the exposure down, so we can see the exact area we're working in. Now, because we shot in anamorphic, it's a different aspect ratio. So we want to make sure that we toggle this to stretch it so it's the right shape. So we move it into, so we adjust it so that it's the right shape to fill the frame and act how it should. So then when we increase the size so it basically fills the frame here, then I'm going to feather it all the way back up to 100 and then change that so it just drops the exposure ever so slightly on the edges. And if you ever get the urge to, you can also move it across. So let's just remove that again. If you want it to be highlighting a certain area of the frame, like so, you can do that so this person becomes highlighted. But we're not going to do that this time. Okay, so let's see the before. It's just a clear frame after, dark around the edges. I might actually, just going to reduce the size ever so slightly so that it just darkens that bit a little. Now that's not all. There's also a monitor section and you get a false color mode, which is just fantastic to be able to switch this on and off, because you can use this to check your exposure levels. So the skin, you tend to want skin on a white person to be around this sort of area here. So maybe the greys to pinks to the lighter pink. We have that on his hand there. So let's see what that looks like. That's a correct exposure on his hand. But as he's backlit and he's in shadow, I'm happy with that. So that tells me that the exposure is pretty good. And you can, you know, have a look yourself and see where everything is. So the purple is the really dark areas here and here. A lot of it is around these sort of blues up to greys, up to greens. And then the water you can see is quite high exposure level wise. But of course, you can use the built-in scopes here to see where all your exposures are too. But I really like that. And with the clipping indicator, so if we go all the way across here, if we push the black point too far, you can see what the clipping indicator does. So that was it, clipping indication. If we turn it off, you can see that these areas are just pitch black. And it's just letting us know that that's all clipped. Again, to have something like this in the app, added on, another fantastic, useful feature for when you're at this stage, when you're grading your film or your footage. So let's go back. I mean, if we turn on film compression and that, it alleviates that somewhat, but still the black point is too far over. But I might keep that there, just so we've got a bit of darkness going on. And I'm bringing the white level up ever so slightly as well, because I think that's nice to do. What happens if we click Luma? How does that affect it? It's quite good actually. As good as it is. So when I see that, I see there's a bit of green in the image. So I might go to this top bit here and add more green. No, let's maybe add a bit of purple. And I would say that's our completed look. Now if we go to the footage out of camera, this is what the raw log footage looked like, and this is the complete look with all the settings. this is a GoPro shot from the new GoPro 12. And this was with what they call the Max Lens Mod 2.0. So it's a super wide field of view. And we're going to try and make this look cinematic. So let's give it a go. So the first thing I want to do is actually add the Alex 4D wide angle fix, but hear me out, we're going to do this twice. So if you see before and after, it makes it more linear looking, more authentic. Now, let's get Dehancer up again. And it's a Rec 709 image, so we're just going to go with that. Find a nice film stock. But actually, before we go ahead with Dehancer too much, I'm going to add a letterbox. And what's that going to do? Well, it's going to make it appear more like the films next to it. Now you need to apply the letterbox after Dehancer, otherwise Dehancer will have influence over the letterbox, which we don't want. So, because it's in a letterbox, you can actually offset it as well. So if I want to frame lower, because we've got room above and below for this shot, that's not quite right. I think offsetting it all the way down there, if you care about the rule of thirds, the sky's taking up closer to a third now, whereas 2/3 of the ground. That's quite good, I think. So that framing I like. That's what it was like before. We've essentially moved everything down, trying to make it look a bit more cinematic. Now there's kind of a giveaway that it's action camera footage, GoPro footage, because we can see a GoPro in the shot as well, which was pointed back at me. Because I did a big cycle ride, 5 days, on the road, a whole mission to get to London. It's on my other channel if you want to check it out. So for this one, it's a Rec 709 clip because it's GoPro footage. Let's find a good film stock for it. So obviously we're having a bit of fun here, going for that sort of vintagey vibe. Yeah, let's try something like that. So I'm going to put it all the way across there, so we can see it's a bit overly saturated, it's a bit digital, it's a bit GoPro-y. When we add that, it pulls things down. It's looking more filmic already. So let's try adding, oh yeah, that's good. So you can see the sky is quite high in the exposure level. When we compress it down, it brings the sky down a bit and actually more separation between the clouds and the blue sky, which immediately looks much more appealing. Now, if we want to pull the black point down a little, I'm no enemy to that. Essentially, it's basically where it was before. And now a film stock, glossy paper. So I think GoPro footage tends to be quite contrasty. So if we want to kind of disguise that it's GoPro, we can reduce the contrast a little bit. And also they tend to be overly saturated. So let's move that color density down and also the saturation down a little. Film grain, let's try 16mm. Halation, we'll go 16, get it in there. And the film damage, again, we'll go for 16. Film breath 16, gate weave 16, and a vignette, it would be rude not to, wouldn't it? Doesn't need to have that much impact. Increase the size a little. There we go. And as you can see, the before and after is quite drastic. So that's Dehancer, and I hope you agree. It's quite a versatile tool, and the fact that there's lots of different tools all in one if you get the Pro version, you could do all your grading within just this one tool if you really want to. But of course, if you want to utilise other tools, you've got those too at your disposal, but always make sure to put it in the right order. So yes, Dehancer is an expensive tool, but because it looks so authentic and you've got so much that you can change, I think it's pretty much worth it. But anyway, it's free to try. So if you want to try it, check out the link below. And if you use the code RUSH, you'll get 10% off your purchase price, and you'll also be helping out the channel, and I'll be really grateful. If you want to check out any of my short films, then I'll leave links to those down below too. And as ever, see you in the next one.